So thank you again for letting me present this very esoteric topic. It's, it's a little bit unusual, and I know that when I speak somewhere about a liquid hernia mesh, people think I'm slightly crazy, and maybe I am. I don't have any doubts about that. Here are my disclosures. I have managed to burn a lot of money in many different research projects. I help with running the EHS, and I'm one of the co-authors of the Hernia Base Camp, if you have heard about it and used it as a resource. And most days I'm just a normal surgeon and a mom of two boys in the middle of Europe. I was wondering earlier, and I actually wonder quite often when I'm at work if there's something as the parallel universe. And I think there must be, because when you look at how other people think, at least in their own heads, they have a very different universe than what's in my head. So I believe that there is something like parallel universe, parallel reality, and that what proved me that I'm actually not that silly to believe that is that some of the brightest minds in the world believe it as well. And here's a little proof that parallel universe must exist, because for most surgeons, when you're speaking about hernia, they think, okay, so if we can't close the hole with force, we need to use more force and try harder, pull harder, um, just use more strength to do it. But for us hernia surgeons, we know that there is a different way how to deal with hernias. So this is one example of why I believe in it. And there's another world where you can just go on Amazon and you can buy a book. It will tell you how to treat your hernia. There is even a very famous influencer on Twitter who teaches people how to treat their own hernias. So this is another universe that we have available. You can join a Facebook group and learn the herbal remedies that treat hernias. There's actually quite a few out there. I only chose some of the more famous ones. And there are some other parallel worlds where there are killer surgeons. They're very dangerous. It's like killer whales in the ocean, but they're quite aggressive, and they're among us. So be aware of those. And in some countries, lawyers actually have to protect people from these killer surgeons because we're so evil and we just go after them. And then there's another parallel universe, and it's called United Kingdom. And I am actually usually very entertained by yeah, sorry, I skipped one. This is another, this is a very scary world. This still belongs to the killer mesh, which exists out there. And this is the United Kingdom universe, which I usually find quite entertaining, and I love reading British news, but sometimes it gets quite scary, especially when it gets down to hernia surgery. And this is what you can see. Some surgeons have found ways how to utilize this, and they have made actually a very good living out of it. In Czech, we have a saying for this business model. It's called "shitting in your own nest," and it works. Definitely earned a few bucks to a few people. But the end of the day, we live in an era where our patients collectively put all the knowledge we have, all the experience, all the training, you know, all the research we have done around the globe for the last decades on the same level as a bag of cheap plastic. And I find this quite disturbing myself. And we live in a very modern era, and research and evolution is part of our daily life, and this is what modern men run like. And when you go for a run these days, you're supposed to wear shoes that have automatic shoelaces that tie themselves, just so you know that you have the perfect tension on your shoelace. And why don't we have a perfect tension on our stitch when we can do it with shoes? Also, these shoes have sensors to know if we run the right way. If we go home, there's all these gadgets that we can use to have our life easier, live our life easier. We can have a liquid protection screen for our phone, robotic Hoover, or a light bulb that scans the quality of our sleep, which, why don't we do this for our patients? We have, it's not enough to have clean teeth these days. You have to have shiny, bright, white teeth to be modern. And modern women don't need to, um, get pregnant at random times. They can just check when do they ovulate. If you want to sequence everybody else's DNA, you can do it with a little gadget that will fit in your pocket. And that takes me slowly to the topic, to a world where everything is just as big as the DNA. It's very small and it's in the nanoscale. The nanoscience transcends the boundaries of traditional scientific disciplines, and it works at a scale where chemistry, physics, material engineering, electrical engineering, or mechanics converge. So imagine that 1 nanometer is about 1 billionth of a meter. And imagine that each one of your noses was about 1 nanometer big. And in that case, each one of your red blood cells would be just as big as the Empire State Building. You would have a hair 3 miles wide, and you would fit the whole continental United States on your fingertip, and you would be just as tall as 7 planet Earths. And the idea of controlling the matter is not new. The concept of nanotechnology, of building the matter from the bottom up, has started at the end of 1959. And the whole principle, as I mentioned, is about building materials from the bottom up and giving them properties and functions that you want them to have, not being given a material and then testing it, what it can withstand and what it can do. But you first decide, what do you want that material to do? And then you create one. So if we manage our thinking to this mentality, or nano mentality, we can actually create some real change. And many medical researchers have done so already. We don't have these nanobots yet that would be able to repair our DNA, but I believe they're coming. But, just think last few years, there were mRNA vaccines. So who haven't heard about those? And there are some other technologies that are still in the research phase, but others are already in use. We have created, as humanity, we have created nanotextiles, which we now use to build nanotubes, where we can grow nerve tissue. And thanks to some of the new drug delivery systems, our colleagues, I now mean the cancer surgeons, may run out of business one day. So getting back to the mesh, imagine you had a mesh which you could give whatever properties you wanted. And then you could even change its properties with some signal. It could be a word, it could be a light, it could be electromagnetic field, or some laser, whatever fancy gadget you would have with it. You would make it stronger, or it would make it elute, I don't know, antibiotics, or it would create the tissue around it to be more acidic or alkaline, or whatever you would want at that time. And there's a technology that allows that to happen. And if you were wondering, or if you were following all the hype around the nanochips that we were all given with our COVID vaccine, at least in Europe, there was a lot of talk about it. I suggest you look up quantum dots. This is what they look like. Bill Gates Foundation have invested a lot of money in their research, and they are able to label you, and they do fit in the vaccine. So this is just a very short list or picture that lists all the nano products that are already in use and that have become sort of part of our normal days, and we don't even think about it. So going back to the mesh, why don't we try for a little while, think backwards, and we forget about the force and the reinforcement, and we focus on what we're trying to achieve with the mesh or with our reconstruction, rather than the process, the pathway. If we can think the mesh away from our pathway, then we will come to a conclusion that all we want is we want to find a way how to deliver a message to one very dumb cell. It's probably one of the simplest cells in human body, the fibroblasts, and you just need to find a way how to communicate with it. And I don't know if there are any whispers of fibroblast whispers or fibroblast psychologists, but in many, many labs around the world, they are the nano spiders, which can create nanofibers of basically any polymer which is soluble in any solution. For the experiments we have done, we have chosen polycaprolactone because it's FDA approved for human use, and it was very readily available. We have a lot of experience with other experiments with it, and that was the easiest for us to use it. So when we spin polycaprolactone, you come up with a mesh which looks under the electron scanning microscope like extracellular matrix. It looks pretty much like the biological mesh, with a very big difference that this costs you like 3 euro cents versus the biological mesh being much more expensive. We tried it in many animals and cell cultures, and in cell cultures the results were amazing. With the animals, it depends a little bit on the type of the animal, but there were some promising results with that. The biggest problem was that this material is roughly, when you want to look at it, it looks like a toilet paper, and it has very similar behavior like a toilet paper. So you make it wet, it just soaks, it falls apart, you know, it's very hard to handle it. It's pretty much impossible to sew in place. So, but it worked, you know, you could see the fibroblasts not only like to live on it, they had quite high metabolic activity, and they like to proliferate on anything that we covered with this material. But the handling was so difficult that we decided, why don't we turn this into a liquid? So again, very easy thing. We took the mesh, we threw it in a fancy version of a blender. It's called cryogenic milling process, and we turned it into these small chopped up bits of our original mesh, and then performed a very simple school-like experiment, which my children would probably be able to do much better than me. We mixed it with some artis, with some fibrin sealant, mixed it together and gave it a little whoosh, and then applied it over a closed laparotomy. And in our case, in this experiment, it was a rabbit. So 6 weeks later, these volunteers were sacrificed, and we have cut out their abdominal wall, which we subjected to every possible test we could get hold of. This is what the samples looked like. And the histology, it wasn't overly interesting because we're surgeons. I'm not sure how good we are at reading these red and blue pictures. And a part of the fact that I stopped believing in all the publications that speak about biodegradation of polycaprolactone, that completely proved them all wrong. But it looked like there was a clear difference between the glue-only group and the liquid mesh group in how many aligned fibers of the new collagen tissue they were present. It was a little bit better in the polarized light, where we saw more collagen 1 fibers in the liquid mesh group. So that was okay. You know, we're getting some results which are kind of positive. But getting back to the force, which was our main interest, because we believe that the tensile strength is the most important for the patient and for us easiest to understand. Most patients don't ask you what type of collagen they have, but they will ask you if they can cough and if they can walk again. So we looked at the tensile strength, and I know the slide's a little bit busy, but I'll try to talk you through it. When you look at the ultimate tensile strength, there wasn't that much improvement. So the blue line is just a simple suture without any material in it, and then you see all the different materials, and you see they were roughly the same in the ultimate tensile strength test. But I don't think that very often we take our patients and we just stretch them until they rupture. It's very maybe in some I don't know, prisons, medieval prisons, they used to do that, but I don't think we do it anymore. But where we see a huge increase was in the yield strength. And again, you see the red line, it's the suture only. And what's circled is one of the mixtures that we used, which showed the highest increase, and was 50% higher yield tensile strength than if we did the suture only. If you manage to increase the yield strength, you increase the resistance to permanent damage. You don't increase the maximum strength, but you increase the force that the material is able to withstand before it breaks and before it can shrink back again. So in another word, I think we did not prove that this sort of mesh can prevent burst abdomen, or this material or the solution can prevent burst abdomen. But what it probably can prevent is the incisional hernia formation in the long run. And that was a very small amount applied in a very simple way, in a really simple experiment, in an on-lay position, without that much thought going into it. So it's very much a work in progress with too many unknowns, but I do believe that if a lot of surgeons went into the nanofiber or nanomaterial research, the endless would suddenly become, the options would suddenly become endless. And we have published our work as a proof of concept, and I hope that we did spark a little bit of imagination and desire to explore the mysteries of this very small world to some other groups. But I do believe that one day soon, the surgical mesh as we know it will belong here in the Museum of Medicine or Surgery. So we're definitely not alone. It's a very interesting topic. There's plenty of reading materials out there for anyone who would wish to contribute or educate themselves. It doesn't let me not to mention Ukraine and send my love to everybody who is struggling there and who we mention at every conference, and try to support them as well as we can through the EHS channels that we run. If you're not a member of the EHS, you can join. Doesn't matter where in the world you're from. And I'd like to finish my talk with an invitation that I started with, and that's an invite to my hometown. Please come end of May next year. It's going to be full of funny talks, interesting presentations, and everybody who wants to be actively involved is more than welcome. So thank you very much for your attention.